Hello, and welcome to our special series of Green Elephant interviews during March 2021, supporting the annual B Corps month. B corporations, or B Corps for short, are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. Throughout March, we are chatting with key people in companies which have chosen to certify as B Corps and become a force for good. Today, I've been joined by Karen Hoskin from Montanya Distillers. Montanya Distillers are a female-led Colorado-based spirits company, shipping American rum all over the US and around the world. They've been a certified B Corporation for about 3 years, and I guess just recertified or just about to recertify. Karen Hoskin is founder of Montanya, having previously worked in non-profits, in management and in design. And Karen has been a rum fanatic for 25 years, I understand. So welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you. 32 years, actually.
32 years. Well, that's almost as many as me, because I became a rum fanatic in about late 90s, I think, when I went to Jamaica. So my first question is Montanya rum as good as Jamaican rum?
Oh gosh, yeah, so it's so different.
Yeah, and that was going to be my question. What is the difference? What is it that you do that's different?
Well, Jamaican rums are made typically at sea level, so the esters that are produced in fermentation are really different. So Jamaican rums are considered to be high ester rums.
Okay.
They have these beautiful flavor profiles that are all about like kind of grassy, dundery flavors. My
Yeah.
rum's at 9,000 feet in the mountains of Colorado. I can't produce those kinds of
Okay.
esters, so it's just really different.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess a lot of the rums I was drinking were extremely strong and
A lot of
didn't
overproof in Jamaica for
didn't
sure.
didn't really have much flavour to them. But I guess part of what makes Montanya Distillers rum different, and you kind of touched on it there, but I'd like to sort of go into it, is your production process, because I think, from what little I know, it has a completely different production ethos than other drinks manufacturers I've kind of seen. So do you want to sort of talk to us about the way you produce your rums?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say one of the things that makes us really different is that we produce on alembic copper pot stills from Portugal. So a lot of pot distilled rum is out there. And many types of rum are actually made on column stills, but
Yeah.
our rum is made on small alembic copper pot stills, which is a
Okay.
really old tradition of distilling, really
Yeah.
so far back.
And I think there's some local gin makers that I know that use a similar steel, copper steel from Portugal. So yeah, it's a bit of a very traditional technique, isn't it?
It is, and it
Yeah.
also is really common in like the cognac region of France, places like that.
Yeah.
Some of the most beautiful spirits in the world are made that way,
Mm.
but it's a little more rare in rum. And what's even more rare is that our stills are open flame; they're direct fire, so we have flame under our stills, which is also rare.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And um, so the traditional kind of stills to do the distilling in, and but I think the whole process from the start of the sugar to the finished bottled drink, or the in the glass in the customer's hand, at every sort of stage of that, it seems that Montanya as a company has given thought to its impact. Um, so
Absolutely.
I
Every
mean,
every single aspect of the company has been assessed from the perspective of how do we do a better job,
mm,
not leaving a trail for someone else to clean up in any way, being really careful and aware of our impact on the environment, on our employees, um, and everything from the glass that we use to bottle the rum to our our labels, our case boxes, our collateral printed materials, how we do events. We are certified plastic neutral, which affects how we do everything, not only in our facility but out in the world as well.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, does it start right with the selection of the? Do you use sugar beet or sugar cane. Not entirely sure exactly how it works. I know it's sugar of some kind. Does it start that early on when you're selecting the crop? Do you get involved with that selection and those providers?
Yes, all rum is made from sugar cane. So my rum is made from sugar cane that comes from Louisiana. Family farmers that I work with directly, and they are friends. That we've worked
Yeah.
together for many years, and they grow non-GMO sugar cane that's machine harvested, not burned in the fields. Really meets an incredibly high air and water quality standard in the
Mm.
U.S. And it's quite close to my distillery. So a
Okay.
lot of people think, oh, rum in the mountains of Colorado, how weird. But I'm as close to my sugarcane growers as many rum distillers in the world are.
Yeah, and I guess it reduces the miles and the transport and the carbon of that transport that be required to bring the product into your facility. Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned the bottles and the glass. I mean, um, do you have a specific type of glass? Have you done some work on the bottle and the recycling of the bottles and that kind of thing?
Yes, we use actually the world's first ever certified cradle to cradle glass manufacturer. Um,
Okay.
it's really an amazing certification, a little similar to B Corp,
Yeah.
except instead of for the company, it's for the product line.
Yeah.
So cradle to cradle basically means that they're looking at every step in the manufacturing process from the beginning of the making of the glass to the recycling of the glass to make sure that it's stewarded from top to bottom. So we only buy glass from this one company, and as far as I know, they're the only cradle to cradle certified glass manufacturer in the world.
Yeah, amazing. And one of our other guests has talked about this cradle to cradle certification. It certainly sounds like something that would sit brilliantly alongside the B Corp's certification. But it's a really interesting space because we were speaking to another food producer who has decided not to use glass because of the additional weight involved in transporting a huge volume of glass, and so they've gone for recycled plastic because it's a lot lighter and therefore the carbon needed to transport it is a lot less. So it's a
Which is true, but you put a high proof alcohol, like 80 proof alcohol or higher, into plastic, especially recycled plastic, and you have a solvent
yeah,
action. Not so good for the consumer on the other end drinking plastic. So I think it's always that careful game of weighing and balancing what what works and doesn't work and what actually has the impact that we're looking for.
yeah. It's always a balance, isn't it, between your ideal and what's practical. And there's always you do the best you can, and you with I guess it's a sort of thing where you're always striving to be better in the knowledge that you're probably never going to be perfect, isn't it?
Exactly. I was just speaking last night in Denver, in Golden, Colorado, to a group of engineering students from School of Mines, which is a
Okay.
big engineering school in the US. And that was exactly, I was telling them that to me, it's like holding a basket of little tiny octopuses. And like one will jump out over here and I'll grab for it. And while I'm grabbing for it, two more jump out over here. And I just constantly feel like I'm wrangling these little tiny pieces of my sustainability plan, and sometimes things are going great and sometimes things end up being challenging, and I never
Yeah.
know what it's going to be. But the key for me is just allowing for the challenge and knowing that that's part of the process and
Yeah.
staying with it, never giving up.
Yeah. And I think I read that you do quite a bit of work in carbon offsetting, so that you understand there's an impact in some of the activities, and then you do quite a bit of offsetting work. What sort of offsets do you use, and how does that fit in with you?
So one of the things that's been important to me is, I don't want to just send some money to a random carbon offsetting partner. It's, I want to know what the project is that I'm offsetting and how it works and
Yeah.
physically actually go visit. So I am working with Terrapass in the US, which is a company that has very identifiable specific carbon offsetting projects. And we have two different undertakings with them. One is the Arcata Community Forest, which is here in the US, in California. And it's a forest that's designed to pull much more carbon out of the atmosphere than most forests.
Okay.
So it's really designed for the purpose of carbon offsetting. So we financially participate in the stewardship and the expansion of that forest. We also work on methane carbon capture in Colorado. So landfills that are emitting methane being covered with capturing technology, which then they pull the methane into the production of energy. So it doesn't go into the atmosphere, which methane is a sort of under considered aspect of carbon pollution in general. So, and we calculate through these very complicated spreadsheets all of the carbon from our incoming freight to our outgoing freight to our stills and how we fire our stills to heating our facilities, the cars we drive, the airplanes we used to travel on, still will be traveling on. And we definitely work through all those numbers and calculate the total gigatons of carbon that we are personally involved in the production of, and then make sure we more than offset it through Terrapass in our partnership.
Yeah. I mean, what I love about that, Karen, is we've spoken to a lot of B Corps who are they're doing offsetting, but they're quite focused on their supply chains, and they know who makes all their materials and where they're sourced from, and they spend a lot of time in that space. But I don't think I've spoken to anybody that has spent a similar amount of time in the offsetting space where they can go and visit and they know what's happening and they can kind of almost see and touch the offsets. And I think that's, if I was listening to this, I'd be thinking, well, how do I go and see and touch my offsets that I'm contributing to? So I think
we have a partner company which is called the Ganesha Cookstove project, and that project is providing a carbon offsetting cookstove to much of the developing world, where many people, billions of people, are actually cooking on 3 rock stoves, which are not only hard on the lung capacity of the primarily women who are cooking on them. So these stoves have gasification. They're available through carbon offsetting for $5 each in Nepal and Myanmar and countries like that. And that's a pet project of ours that kind of grew right out of Montanya, actually. And we're, that's been a really kind of very tangible way to understand how carbon offsets even work to begin with. Because I think a lot of people don't even know how that works. How do you become a certified carbon offset project? And who buyers of the carbon offsets and the sellers of the carbon offsets? It's a complicated business.
It is, absolutely. No, that's, I mean, we'll look that up, and we'll put some links to those things in the show notes for people to check that out. I've not heard of those though, so I'll go and look at them as well. And I mean, I also saw, just sort of finishing up on the production process, that you do, or you generate most, or I don't know if it's all of your own energy via using wind. Is what was the thinking behind that? Because that's not an easy or a cheap thing to do to start with, I guess.
Well, that is also a partnership. So we live in a valley and operate the business in a valley that is sort of perpendicular to the Colorado wind flow, which makes it actually difficult for us to generate it on our own facilities. Although we do have some solar power that we operate on our own facilities, but we partnered with a company called Arcadia, who has some of those big wind generators near our facilities in Colorado, and they are selling back to us 100% green energy for our company. So yes, it's 100%, but we don't generate it all ourselves. Someday we hope to. It's in the goals of the company, but in the meantime, this is a good, solid partnership, and it meets the highest standards for the Audubon Society and all the various folks that have have interests in how wind power is generated as well. Yeah,
no, it's great. I mean, it's about doing what you can rather than perfection, and it's a great way to. I want to talk about diversity now, because International Women's Day on Monday. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the B Corp interviews we've released this week, they've all been with women. We've been talking about period poverty. We've had strong female leaders from B Corps. B Corps as a whole are doing, bucking the trend. I think it's about 40% of B Corp leaders are women. So compare that with other business, and it's doing remarkably well. But even all that said, what I gathered from Montanya is that you are doing even more than everybody else in this space. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on diversity and what your approach is to it.
Well, I mean, I think of diversity in so many different ways, from, gender to ethnicity to, color and age. And so it's been a priority for me for a long time. I live in a county in Colorado that is 98% white. And I didn't move here because it was 98% white. I moved here because I'm a serious backcountry enthusiast. So I backcountry ski, I hike, I backpack, I do all the things. And this is like a heavenly spot for that. But I was distressed by the homogeneity of my community 10 years ago, and really went kind of into this. So I work in an industry that's primarily male. When I started 13 years ago, I was that I could find one of two craft distillers in the United States. There were a few more in the rum world, in other countries. But so I just really felt uncomfortable with it. And I thought, well, I can sit around and wait, which is what a lot of people do. They say, I'm just, I'm not getting applicants. So how am I supposed to hire someone if I don't have any applicants? I made a very conscious effort to recruit and train and build equity within the company, and make a home for people who might otherwise in my community not feel so represented. And so we are only 75% white in my company, and our leadership team is 60% female. And in our leadership team, we're about 40% of color. And we've just worked really hard, and it's been one of the most satisfying things, because then this year when when BLM activism kind of became more of a thing, we were not only well positioned to talk about those issues publicly, but we weren't in conflict with ourselves. We weren't like championing something we'd never done anything about.
So I'm really interested, because our company is based in a location in the UK which is probably even more than 98% white, and so there's no excuse for the male-female equation, but in terms of finding those ethnic minorities, they're not in our region. And it sounds like you had some. So did you go outside of region to find them? Did you specifically go to a city or another area to find these people and bring them in, or how did you do that?
It's such a good question. Sorry, the light went off.
That's okay.
It's like an motion sensor. So it's a really good question, because that was my presumption as well, that I lived in a community that didn't have a community of color. And we were 9 years out recently from a census, so I didn't really, generally I couldn't know, because all the data were old. So I actually literally just started finding people of color in my community, not just to hire them, but to work with them and be an activist with them and find out what their priorities were. And it was astounding to me how many people were in my own community that I didn't know, that people didn't know, and they were kind of flying a little bit under the radar, because it's not I learned over time, my community is not fabulously welcoming, and that we had to work on that too. And so, I run a bar and restaurant, and I found a local chef, and we became friends, and then we talked over a period of years, months, and eventually when I had an opening, she moved over and came to work for Montanya. And she's now my head chef, and she's South African, and just brings an incredible vibrancy to our kitchen.
it wasn't so much finding people when you had a role. It was more about building those connections in that community before there was any opening, and then just to improve your understanding of, if there was an opening, then who might be out there. So
and then on top of that, paying people properly,
yeah,
building a whole kind of system of benefits, and making sure that they can have housing in my very expensive mountain town community. And
yeah,
so it's not just about recruitment and getting someone in the door. It's like a
yeah.
whole,
It's a really interesting thing you say that, because you say we need to pay them properly and make sure they're well looked after. And I think as B Corps, sometimes we take those sorts of things for granted. We think, well, just doesn't every business just do that anyway? And we forget that they don't. And of course you pay them more than the living wage. Of course you ensure they've got flexible working arrangements. Of course you make sure they've got all the equipment and facilities and the training and the support they need. That's just what you do. But we forget.
When they come to me, I get to hear the stories about their past employment
Mm,
situations. I
yeah,
gave a raise to one of my Black employees recently because he became forklift certified, which means, it's an OSHA certification in
yeah,
the US for safety.
yeah,
And he was just so flabbergasted. And I was like, why are you so flabbergasted that I'm giving you a raise? You did advanced training, you learned something, you did it really on your own.
yeah,
And he just said, nobody's ever done that for me. And especially not without me feeling like I had to ask. And a lot of time, he was like, I never really felt like I could ask.
yeah,
So that was really a wake up call for me, that I have to be extra on top of making sure, because from a cultural perspective, especially my immigrant employees. So I have another Ghanaian first generation immigrant, and she was raised in a family where you do everything in the US just to blend in. You don't
mm,
distinguish yourself or raise your head. You especially don't advocate for the rights of Americans or Black residents of the U.S., because that's just dangerous to you. And so I've learned so much about what kinds of cultural differences there are that are contributing to labor and workforce situations that I have to remedy and address.
yeah, yeah. And I guess moving on from that, I guess transparency must be very important within the things that you do, because without all the employee stuff, all the sustainability, and all that stuff, it kind of relies on transparency. I guess. Do you have a particular approach to transparency, or is it just something that you just do?
Well, we just did actually this year for the first time an impact report. So
Yes.
it was a report that covered everything in the company, from our plastic to our it's almost like the nutrition labels on the side
Yeah.
of a product. I am starting to think about creating a nutrition label, only it's a sustainability label for everything my company does.
Yeah.
So that we are really working hard to tell everybody, like, if you want to know where this came from and where it went and how it's handled, um, you don't have to wait and try to ask someone a question. It's all right there in front of you.
Mm, mm.
Oh, and I wanted to add one more thing to the diversity conversation,
Sure.
because I live in a ski town in Colorado, up in
Yeah.
the Rockies at 9,000 feet. Um, there's a J1 program here, which is where people from around the world who want to learn to speak English, or they want to kind of prepare for going to college in the US or something, they can get into this J1 program and come and work for me on J1 visas.
Okay.
Um, and we have a J1 program, so we've had Kurdish asylum seekers and Jamaican residents and things like that come and work for us, because they come through that program. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And we pay them more than most J1s get paid, which is also awesome.
Yeah. No, it sounds amazing, and exactly the sort of thing that we will promote. We will clearly link it in the show notes for this recording, but we'll push that out there, because those programs are amazing. I guess carrying on the the transparency, the impact report, I guess that's where kind of B Corps come in, because, you know, if you're a B Corp, anybody can go and see your score and see how you did in any area, really, can't they? It's there for everybody to see.
I like it. I like it when they do that, because we are a best for the world overall company as well, which
Great.
means top 10% of B
Yeah.
Corp. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing achievement in itself, because, you know, most people don't, you know, I think the statistic was that, you know, 100,000 people start the assessment, yet only 4,000 have actually been certified. So, you know, most people don't even meet the grade. So not only meet the grade, but to get in the top 10%, that's an amazing achievement. So yeah, congratulations on that. Why was it that you chose to go down the B Corps route? Was there something about it that you thought, yeah, this is for us?
Absolutely. I would say I'm a skeptic. I
Okay.
don't necessarily want a product or a company to tell me about their sustainability, because you can just smoke and mirrors that all day long. You can
Yeah.
say, you know, and I experienced it. I visit a lot of craft distilleries, and I sit on panels internationally. I was recently on a sustainability panel in the UK. And it's interesting to me to hear what other people do, and really what they don't do is almost as telling. And so I'm a skeptic. I don't want to hear necessarily what you say. I want to know what the B Corp says.
Mm.
I want a third party look at everything that you do, and that balancing between not just I have a solar panel over here, or you know we have a beehive in the back or something. I
Yeah.
want to know, like, your governance and your banking relationship, and your you know, whether you're using GMOs or not, or just all of that stuff is important to me. So I know I can pop into the B Corp directory if I want to buy a pair of wool socks, and I can search socks,
Yeah.
and I'll find out which company I'm going to buy my socks from, because it takes the guesswork out for me, for sure.
Yeah. No, amazing. And certainly that's what we do. We like to work with other B Corps. If we're going to choose a supplier or find somebody, we want another B Corp, because it's, as you say, that independent verification that they are doing or trying to do the right thing. They're doing many the right thing, and I guess they're trying to improve, which brings me on to kind of, have you just recertified, or are you just about to go through it? Whereabouts are you?
We are in the process. So our
Okay.
recert happens in September.
Okay.
But as you know, it's best not to wait until the last minute. And there's a whole, since we certified the first time, there's a whole new questionnaire. So, but
Yeah.
the bottom line is that it's not a chore for us. We're tracking all the data.
Mm.
We're documenting all the relationships, and you know, our significant suppliers are certified before we start to do business with them. So it's not it's just not a hard process for us. I think it would
Okay.
be if I wanted to figure out, like, what should I do to be good, then I would find it a very onerous process. But for us, it was like we were already doing all these things, and then to get into that B Corp cert and have them just say, yeah, that's, you're on the right track. And of course, everything can always be better. So one great example of that is that we had commercial composting available to us when I certified as a B Corp.
Yep.
And that company that was doing it went out of business about a year and a half ago. And I was just completely at a loss, because I run a bar and restaurant. We produce bio waste from the bar and restaurant. We produce bio waste from the distilling process. And I had nowhere to send it. And it was going to the landfill, which was completely unacceptable. Yeah. So I bought a biodigester and installed it on site. And now we run 80 pounds a day. I mean, I think in the last couple of weeks, we've run about 800 pounds of bio waste through our own biodigester. It was maybe one of the best investments I've ever made. I work with a company called Power Knot, and I can look at an app and see how much bio waste we've processed, and it turns it in 24 hours. It turns that 80 pounds into fertilizing gray water. So we can either use it to, you know, put into vessels for people to take for their flower gardens or their their gardens, or we can wash it down the drain without any impacts to the to the water supply.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting perspective on it, Karen, because most of the B Corps we've spoken to have said that it's, I guess there's a lot of work and it's quite challenging to certify and then to recertify, and which is a slightly different perspective to you who were saying, well, it's straightforward because this is what we do. Is the improvement straightforward as well? Do you think getting better is something that's been challenging, or has that been easy because of things you've done? Or
well, it's interesting because I went to the B Corp the conference in 2019, I guess, in summer of 2019. They didn't have one in 2020, sadly. And that was such an eye opener for me because it helped me to really see like what I'm not doing and how like the CEO of Patagonia spoke at that gathering, and I just thought, oh my, I was so inspired. Sitting in the audience, like tears streaming down my face. There's so much more. There's just always more. And so what I would call my my plan for improvement has I feel like it's been relatively easy because of being, I call it the back room of the B Corp. You become certified and then you're let in through the back door and you're like, there's this whole world back there of all these companies that are doing such cool stuff. And I don't feel that camaraderie with my industry fellow owners. There's so few B Corps in the craft spirits world and the spirits world in general. So when I am with them, I don't feel that sense of camaraderie around focusing on sustainability and equity and social responsibility. And so, I find that to be the most fun part. My HR person is now participating in the B People, which is all, this group of HR people in the world of B Corps. And so I could go on for days, but no, I just live in the land of like, oh, I should be doing that.
I can completely concur, Karen. The community is amazing, and you do just feel you feel at home with like-minded people who are aspiring to the things that you're aspiring to. And thoroughly recommend any listeners just get involved, get on the journey. It's amazing, and it's worth all the time and effort that you put into it. Karen, we're asking all our guests if they've got a tip or an action or something they can suggest for listeners to go away and do. So if there was one thing you would suggest to listeners to say, go away and do this or try this, what would that be?
I've thought a lot about this question in my life in general, because there's so much variety out there of like different types of businesses and different types of priorities and things. But I guess I would say that the word you used is really salient right to this conversation, which is the journey. I just always tell people when they ask me, like, don't think of it as a destination. Becoming a company that is sustainable and has this type of ethos, it's not a destination. You're never going to get there. And so because sometimes people throw up their hands and they're like, I'm never going to do enough, and then I try to do this and then this person says, well, that's not good. That happened to me when we first went 100% wind powered. My social network blew up with but the birds and the all the stuff, and always some kind of way in which you're going to feel defeated. And so I'm a geeky researcher. If someone says to me, that's not a good outcome, that's not a good sustainability plan, it's a kind of on the surface of it, it looks good, but it's not actually good. I'm going to go deep on that and research and talk to experts and try to figure out, like, is this really truly sustainable? Because there is a lot of stuff out there that it's just robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I also really look at it as a timeline. It's like something up front might not be nearly as good as it's going to be over a 10-year payoff. So all this solar power that I just did, people are like, yeah, but it takes so much energy to produce solar panels. And I thought, yes, if you're going to use them for a year or two, that is absolutely true. But if you're going to use them for 10 years, their payoff is
Yeah.
so radical. And so you just have to think in different timelines sometimes too.
Yeah, yeah. So,
and I also tell people that it's not as expensive as you think. Like that's the number one hurdle that I hear from people is I want to be more sustainable, but I can't afford it. I'm like, what are you looking at for numbers? Because again, you have to put things on a timeline, and look at the whole impact of something. So something might cost a little more upfront, but it's going to pay off over time for sure.
yeah, yeah. And I would say to those people who say they can't afford it, I would say you can't afford not to, because more and more customers are saying we will only buy from companies that are demonstrating their sustainability or their environmental credentials. And so the move is happening, the shift is starting. You either get on and start the journey, as you say, start the journey now, or you're going to have to do it in 5 or 10 years anyway. So you might as well get started now.
Exactly. And I have two kids, I this is actually kind of a funny story. So I have a 21 and a 23-year-old.
Okay.
And my son, I was with him recently, my older son, who has just started this amazing company called Hoskin Capital, which is all sustainable investment. And he's created his own portfolio of sustainable investments. And he handed me his business card, which was a reusable business card that you just tap on an iPhone or you scan the QR code on a Android. And I just was like, I didn't even know that existed. I'm always learning. And so now my whole staff has reusable business cards. They cost $9 a piece. And, and instead of having to go back to the office and enter everybody's information, you just bam, it's like right contacts. So
yeah, they're great things, and save an awful lot of waste. Brilliant.
But the reason I mentioned that is because I'm doing it for my kids to some extent, because they're going to inherit the world that I leave behind, and I don't want to be mortified that I participated in the ruination of their environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And Karen, we also ask our guests if there's a book or a film they would recommend for listeners. Something to read. Have you got anything that you could suggest?
Well, the book that I want to recommend, I'm not sure your policy about using a somewhat of an expletive on your show. You can bleep it out.
You carry on. It doesn't matter. We've had all sorts of recommendations so far away.
Well, the book that changed my life was called The No Asshole Rule.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's interesting because it's not my favorite book, quite honestly. It's a nonfiction, business-focused book, and generally I'm a reader of fiction. I love science fiction, etc. But it gave me this tidbit that I put into action in my life that has been radically life-changing, which is that if I think that people that I'm working with are going to just wake up some morning and be like, oh, Karen was right, or like people that I'm at odds with over business practices, or that are angry at me because I'm making them look bad when I talk about sustainability in the rum world publicly, or making their company look bad even if I don't mention them because they're having challenges with sugarcane grower health and well-being, or pollution being dumped into the ocean from their distilleries or whatever. I just learned that I'm not going to impact them. I'm not going to change anyone. And I stopped trying to convince anyone of anything. And that was a real life change for me, because it makes it a lot more palatable to speak about these issues when people don't feel like you're trying to be an evangelist to them.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. We'll find that. I've not heard of the No Asshole Rule myself. We will look it up. We'll link it in the show notes. And great. I mean, it's great to have different suggestions and things that are not just about environmental sustainability all the time. It's good to have some different options. Karen, great. We're going to get on to Fact or Fake in a minute, but if anybody wants to find out more about yourself or Montanya Distillers, What's the best place to get hold of you? Is it via the website?
Yeah, montanyarum.com for
Okay.
sure. Montanya is spelled with a Y, so
Yep.
I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
I also have a website called karenhoskin.com that's more specific to my own work across several different
Okay.
company platforms and public speaking types of things. And then also, yeah, I think my LinkedIn is very vibrant as well. And
Yeah.
so that's a great way to, it's not necessarily a great way to message me, but it's a great way to connect, and all my contact info is in
Sure.
there.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, as you say, we'll put those on the show pages. So listeners, if you're interested in rum or interested in what Karen's talked about, then make the connection and find out more. So now it's time for fact or fake, where we have some statements, and today it's all about rum because we are talking about rum. So I've got 3 statements about rum, and I'd like you to tell me whether they are a fact, they're true, or they're a fake, whether I've made them up. So are you ready, Karen?
Yes.
Great. So the first one is, some of the many other names for rum are Nelson's Blood, Kill Devil, Demon Water, Pirate's Drink, Navy Neaters, and Barbados Water.
True.
That is true. And I love some of these. I mean, Kill Devil, Nelson's Blood. Apparently they preserved Admiral Nelson's body in rum while they were transporting it back home. So there's some, there's some really interesting origins for those names.
There's another part of that story, though, which is that they preserved him in a cask of rum that was filled with rum. But by the time it got back to England, it was empty. They actually, the sailors, by mistake, drank all the rum in that barrel that had Nelson's body in it.
Dear. Anyway, moving on. The next one is in the 1800s, rum was used as a beauty product for its ability to clean hair and strengthen its roots. Is that a fact or is it a fake?
I think that might be a fake, but I don't know.
No, it's actually true. Rum was the go-to beauty product because it cleaned hair and strengthened roots. So if you run out of shampoo, Karen, then you've obviously got plenty of spare to clean your hair with.
I learn something every day of my life, right there.
And finally, the last one is India is the world's largest market for rum. Is that a fact or is it a fake?
Oh, I believe that is a fact, but it may be a little bit further east. But I think that's gosh, good question. I'm going to say possibly fact, yes.
Yeah, well done. You win 2-1. India, I mean, not the country I would first think of, but the world's largest market for rum is in India. And I think they made some early sugar-based rum-like drinks, hundreds of years ago. And now they still like rum. So yeah, I don't know if you're selling rum to India, but maybe that's an opportunity for you.
India is where I discovered rum.
Okay.
I had Bacardi and other types of rum before that, but I went to India and I was sitting on a beach in Goa and I was served my first taste of aged rum from a company called Old Monk, which is an Indian rum maker. And although it's not my absolute favorite rum now, it's near and dear to my heart because it began my love affair with rum back in January of 1989. I'll never forget it. Having that friendship and thinking.
Yeah, and I guess your absolute favorite rum now is Montanya.
Weirdly it is, and I'm not just saying that. It's because I worked really hard to create a rum that filled a niche that I couldn't find. But I have a lot of other favorites too.
Great. Well, I look forward to finding some Montanya in the UK and trying it for myself. But
we're signed up with Amazon and the Whiskey Exchange and several other online retailers in the UK. So easy to get.
Great. Karen, it's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed talking about rum. I've really enjoyed talking about the diversity piece as well. That's so interesting. And just want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. Nice talking with you as well. See you in Colorado someday, I hope.
Yes. We really hope that you found this special B Corp Month episode both informative and entertaining. Make sure you don't miss any of the other 31 interviews with B corporations who are striving to be a force for good. So make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a thing. And don't forget to spread the word with others. If you have any questions about being or becoming a B Corp or any comments and suggestions about the show, please do get in touch. You can email studio@greenelephant.show or visit our website greenelephant.show. Or find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube or Twitter by searching for Green Elipod or The Green Elephant Show. You can also review the show on Google and Apple Podcasts. Join us tomorrow and we hope you have a sustainable day.